Hello and welcome to this YouTube video where I will be talking about Isospora belli, which is a parasite. So, along with that, I will be talking about their morphology, their life cycle, their pathogenesis, their clinical manifestations, their lab diagnosis, treatment, and prevention. So, without further ado, let's move on to our etiology. So etiology, our cytoisosporiasis is caused by Cytoisospora belli, right? This is a parasite that belongs to the Coccidia subclass within the Epicomplexer phylum. Now, we can also say that cytoisosporiasis is an intestinal disease, right? That is caused by the parasitic Coccidian Cytoisospora belli, right? So, this is the same parasite that used to be called Isospora belli, but now it is called as Cytoisospora belli, right? Isosporiasis is more common in areas with poor sanitation, and it is more prone to people who are immunocompromised, right? Such as people with AIDS. Um, Immunocompetent people will only have infections resulting in limiting diarrhea, whereas people who are immunocompromised, they will have persistent life-threatening diarrhea, right? So moving on, we have epidemiology. So although our Cytoisospora belli is found throughout the world, we say that it is most common in areas of tropical region or subtropical regions such as Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. Right. Next, here's a fun fact. The word belli comes from the word bellium, and bellium means war. So this is named as such because the first Isospora belli was observed within soldiers during World War One. Therefore, this is the name, right? And then moving on, we have the classifications. Now, in our classifications, we start from the domain down to the species. So, our domain is Eukaryota, our phylum is Epicomplexa, our class is Conoidaceae, our family is Sarcocystidae, and our genus is Cytoisospora, and of course our species is Cytoisospora belli. Right? Moving on, we have the morphology. So looking at this picture, we have picture A and we have picture B. So in picture A, so we have these oval shapes called oocytes. Right, oocytes are found in the developmental stages. So oocytes, right? Each oocytes will have two sporoblasts, right? And this will be present in the immature oocytes. They have not fully developed yet, right? Then moving on to the second picture, we see that each oocyte they will still have the sporoblast, but now it has matured. So this sporoblast they mature into sporocysts, right? And each sporocyst will have a sporozoid. These sporozoids are the infectious form of the parasite. So these are released when the host ingests them, right? Next, we have the life cycle. Um, so this is quite a bit, but this is the most simplified version of it. So, okay, so first, what happens is there is ingestion of matured oocytes via contaminated food or contaminated water with human feces, right? So once that is ingested, The sporulated oocytes will bind to the epithelial surface of the intestine, right? Once they bind, then excistation occurs. Excistation of sporozoites happen. This is when the sporozoites are released from the sporocysts, right? The sporocysts, they blast, they rupture, and they exit. Now, since the sporozoites they have exited, right, they will invade the intestinal epithelial cells. Once they invade that, the sporozoites will turn into trophozoites, right? After becoming trophozoites, they will in turn become a schizont, right? And the schizont will then undergo schizogony, right? This is asexual reproduction, right? So schizogony takes place, right, to produce merozoites, and merozoites will then be released into the intestinal lumen. Once they are released, right, then gametogamy occurs, right? This is the sexual reproduction. So gametogony occurs. So there will be few merozoites which will undergo this, where they will turn into micro and macro gametocytes. Then comes fertilization, where the gametocytes will fuse together to form a zygote. And this zygote comes to oocyte formation, right? The zygote will develop into a immature oocyte, as we've seen in the previous slide. First, a immature oocyte is formed, then a mature oocyte is formed, right? So after the development of a immature oocyte, right, these will be excreted in the feces. They will be excreted from the feces, and they will start to mature in the soil. So here we can say it's the environmental stage now. So the sporulation of the mature oocytes within 5 days, right, of incubation in the soil, along with the moisture and everything. So once they both mature, right, the mature and the immature oocytes will exist in the soil, and the cycle will again continue to happen once a individual has again ingested any contaminated food or contaminated water, right? Next we have our pathogenesis, right? Now pathogenesis, some of this is covered in the life cycle, but in four simple steps, the pathogenesis of isosporiasis is first invasion. So, as we have discussed, the ingested mature oocytes via contaminated food and contaminated water, right, will release sporozoites, right, which was the infectious form, right. The sporozoites will then attack our small intestine, right. Then multiplication happens, right. The sporozoites, they turn into trophozoites, right, and these trophozoites invade other healthy cells after going through schizogony, right, which was the asexual reproduction. Then destruction happens. In destruction, we say our merozoites burst out of the infected cells. When they burst, the intestinal lumen gets damaged by rupture, right? So when that gets damaged, inflammation occurs. So in inflammation, we say inflammatory cells are drawn out as a result of a immune response, right? Immune response to cell injury or the presence of a parasite, right? And this inflammatory process will be the cause of the symptoms such as your abdominal pain and stomach discomfort, right? Moving on, we have the clinical manifestations. Our clinical manifestations basically means our symptoms, right? So the symptoms, the most common symptom is diarrhea, right, and dehydration. So let me explain. So when a person has diarrhea, they will have lots of fluid loss from their body, and fluid loss means a rise of dehydration in the body. So diarrhea and dehydration are the two most common ones, right? This is also associated with headache, fever, nausea or vomiting, and abdominal pain, of course. Right? Um, so moving on, we also have the lab diagnosis. So how is isosporiasis diagnosed in the lab? So there are two ways, right? So this only occurs through stool examination. You will examine stools and you will examine them for oocytes, mature oocytes, right? So, so method one, we have a wet mount, right? So a stool sample will be mixed with normal saline or iodine and observed under the microscope for any oocytes, right? And the second one, we have our Zn staining. So Zn staining we know is used to identify acid fast bacteria, right? So what happens in Zn staining is that the sample smear, right, the dried sample smear, right, that will be stained using carbon fusion, and then it will be decolorized and then counterstained with methylene blue, right? The oocytes will appear as bright pink, right, and the background will be blue. There's more steps to Zn staining, but I've just simplified it for you, right? Next, we have the treatment. So the treatment, so we have two types of treatment. So the first line of treatment will be a person will be treated with trimethoprim sulfur methoxazole, right? That is the abbreviation for it, TMP slash SMX, right? This can be given in two tablets for 4 times a day for 10 days, right? And this is mostly given to immunocompromised patients, right, whose diarrhea did observe and consist of matured oocytes, right? On the other hand, if a person cannot tolerate or is allergic to trimethoprim sulfur methoxazole, right, they can always be treated with pyrimethamine, right? Yeah. Moving on, we have the prevention. So prevention is the most easiest step. So for prevention methods I've listed here are hand washing, right? So always wash your hands after you have visited the washrooms or even touched mud or anything, right? Even clean food and water, right? Always ensure you have clean food and clean water, right? Always wash your foods before cooking and ensure you have a clean drinking source, right? Also waste management, throw your rubbishes properly, and also hygiene education, right? It is very important for individuals to be educated upon the importance of hygiene, right? And last, these are my references that I have taken out my information from for this video. I hope you have understood and gotten a insight upon Isospora Belli. And thank you so much for watching.